Hey there, my name's Oisin Lunny and welcome to Audio Talks, presented to you by Harman, the podcast where we meet the people shaping the world of sound. And today I am delighted to be joined by Karen Pearson, award-winning producer, mentor and founder and CEO of Folded Wing, a company changing the face of UK radio and podcasting. From her early days at the BBC to producing landmark shows and championing diverse voices, Karen has a fascinating and singular career path full of amazing people, passion and purpose. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Karen Pearson.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. You've had really a very singular, very remarkable journey through music and broadcasting. Can you take us back to the beginning and talk about where your love for radio and music first began?
I grew up in Southend-on-Sea as an only child, just with my mum. Music was everything to me from a very, very young age. I was blessed to have friendships that kind of straddled all the musical genres, from skateboarders that are into hip hop to like proper straight edge punk through to jazz. And I grew up right in Southend city centre in a flat with my mum. And at the end of the road was Essex Radio. And at the other end of the road was a nightclub called Sax, which is still open today. And when I was growing up, they had daytime jazz. And people like Snowboy and some amazing local jazz people would play in that club. So it was all around. My mum loved music, but my mum was kind of more into Luther Vandross and Lionel Richie and that side of stuff. Radio as well became... Obviously, Essex Radio is down the end of my road. So I was like, oh, what is this? And then I was lucky enough. So Southend-on-Sea is just an hour away from London. You could pick up the pirate radio stations from London. You could pick up Kiss FM sometimes, and also John Peel. So John Peel on BBC Radio 1 was I would hide under the bed covers. My mum was quite strict, so I wasn't able to listen to music and radio past bedtime, but I found a way of listening on my Walkman underneath the bed sheets. That sort of personal connection to him and the pirate radio DJs that I listened to had a massive impact on me from as early as I can remember.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's such a beautiful kind of image there and very, very relatable. Myself, I'm an only child, but I've, step siblings around the place. Music was such a great friend when I was growing up. I totally identify with what you were talking about there. And I love that image of you hiding under the duvet, going deep into the world of radio. That's brilliant.
And then I got to work with John Peel sort of further down the line, and I told him that story. So day one of my work experience at Radio 1, I was sat next to John Peel. Anyway, that's a story for later on in the podcast.
We are definitely coming back to that story. Amazing. You started with this great passion for radio. You moved into working with Radio 1 there. Was there a kind of bit in between where you got into DJing or anything like this? What was that kind of bridge?
The DJing came a lot later when I was working with Giles. The bridge, a lot of my friends were DJing in Southend. So there was the Sunrooms, there was the Pink Toothbrush, there was Club Art. These were clubs that I was at every single week. I was just so fortunate to grow up in a place that had all these venues. Sometimes I got in underage. My friend Lauren, who's still a close friend to this day, I used to stay at her house in Holbridge up the road, and we go to the Pink Toothbrush every single week. Her brother was a year older, and he used to be DJing hip hop when we got home. That's how I got into music. Then I started work. I started work when I was 12 in hairdressers and things. But as I got older, when I was 15, 16, I started to work at the Clis Pavilion Theatre in Southend. And it's like 1,000 capacity. Downstairs, there would be jazz. Upstairs would be The Prodigy, Oasis. It was sometimes their first gigs. I was around all of this stuff. When I was at college, I did economics and I did all my banker certificates and did media studies just for fun. Like that was like the fun thing to balance out economics and the French. But the media studies teacher, I really struggled with writing. And he used to give me loads of extra essays, mainly I remember doing about the BBC, about their white paper and their green paper and stuff like that, and really getting deep into it. And it was him, Steve Jeffries. He was like, look, you have to pursue media. Like you just have to continue to do it. And I said to him, I can't necessarily afford to go to university. I just want to go working. I'm just going to do it. So in his eyes, I just went working, and I applied to loads of banks with my banker certificates. I got a job at the Swiss bank. And then I remember, because like I said, Southend and London were close. Friends would work in the stock exchange, they'd work in the bank, they'd do all of that stuff. And I got the job and I remember coming home and I just burst out crying. I was like, it's not what I want to do. And my mum just said, look, okay, at least try. So I wrote hundreds of letters to every single local radio, Radio 1, all of the radios, all of the record labels, everything. And they all came back saying, no, sorry, we have nothing. So at that point, I thought, well, maybe I need to take Steve's advice and I'll go and do a uni degree that has got work experience as part of the course. Loads of universities degrees, you've got to do your work experience in the holidays. I couldn't. I had to work lots of jobs to get through it. And this particular course in Leeds, Media and Business Management, had its work experience. So I go along first year, and then I thought the careers teacher's going to help me get into music or radio. And I, first day, have my meeting with her, and she just laughed and said, well, we can't help you get into music or radio. I was like, oh, God.
Damn.
I've come here. This is what I want to do. But being in Leeds was absolutely mind-blowing. So I thought Southend was mind-blowing. I'm then in Leeds and the music scene in Leeds and the move-on-ups and the wardrobes and Roy Ayers coming to play for free, all of that stuff. And then I wrote the same letters again to the same organisations, all the record labels, just everything. And they all came back saying, sorry, we're affiliated to colleges in London. We don't have anything. I was like,
come on.
This is too much. This is too much. To cut a long story short, I wrote to BT. I was just trying everywhere. And BT came back saying, well, you can come and work in our broadcasting services department. And I just thought, that's not what I want to do, but I've done it. And I remember the same work experience lady going, oh, I'm so excited. We don't have a connection with BT. And I'm just thinking, it's not music, it's not radio. About 2 days before I was about to start, I got a voicemail message on my mum's answer machine saying, this is Virgin Records. We've got a 2-month work experience in our promotions department. And you can imagine, I was like, oh my God. And so I went and did it. I got a phone call from the same careers person screaming at me, you can't let BT down. And I was like, I can. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. So I went and obviously it was amazing. It was at a time when The Verve and the Spice Girls and Massive Attack, it was that time, 97, 98, all around them. It was mind blowing. And as a thank you at the end of my work placement, I got a tour of Radio 1. At that time, there was 2 pluggers just for Radio 1 because if a track got on a playlist at Radio 1, it was in the top 10. So there was 2 pluggers and they gave me a tour and I met a producer. His girlfriend was working at Virgin, so I got his number and I pestered him for a whole year until he gave me work experience. And he did. Simon Willis, rest in peace. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. He gave lots of people opportunities, but that was the start. And then I never left radio. I absolutely love Virgin, but what I realised was working in the promotions department, I couldn't actually promote music I wasn't feeling myself. I couldn't pretend that I loved it. And going back a step is that I loved music, but I was never any good at instruments, or all my friends would play instruments or they're DJ and stuff like that. I hadn't discovered that side. Sort of radio was a way of, connecting with music.
Phenomenal. I love that story. My goodness, that's a masterclass in perseverance right there.
Oh my God.
Really?
Yes, I wish I kept the letters. I had folders and folders of rejection letters and I wish I kept them, but they're in my memory.
But my goodness, it worked. And there you are at Radio 1. Talk to us a bit about how you made your way there into being one of the young producers at Radio 1 and doing this very interesting job. And as you say, your passion for music really found its perfect outlet where you get to help a lot of DJs, you get to help a lot of musicians get their music heard. Talk to us a bit about that career trajectory once you found that foot in the door.
There was a guy called Greg and he was Judge George's producer. And he was the gentleman that gave me my very first kind of tour of Radio 1 when I started. And he introduced me to every single person. And he said, I'm going to introducing you to them so you can go and you can ask them if they need any help. And if they ask you to do something, you don't quite know how to do it, say yes, and then you'll find a way of doing it. It was the best advice. And it's advice that I give to anybody else. And it was amazing because then I got to work in the mainstream team, in the specialist team. And like I said, day one, I'm sat next to John Peel. And it was absolutely mind-blowing. I was working on the evening session with Steve Lamacq. And that team, also an absolute dream. And what happened was, I remember the producer at the time was a guy called Rhys Hughes, who's now head of music for the BBC. He said, "Oh, Karen, can you just find this CD? Everything's very fast paced in live radio. Can you just find this CD?" It's a live show. So I run upstairs, I'm trying to find the CD, but I unfortunately left piles of CDs on John Peel's desk and left it a bit of a mess. And so he came in. John liked to have, a drink. He may go out before the show or whatnot. After the show, I came in and he'd separated our desks, and he'd taken a little bit of a record mailer and he'd put a little post another inch and "We Invade" on it, which I've actually got framed. He signed it John Peel. And then the next day he was like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean it." So that was my connection to John Peel. But yeah, it carried on from there. Every single show, I learned lots of lessons. I learned how to edit. That was supposed to just be 2 weeks, and I managed to do the whole 2 months there. And then what happened was I was obviously very, very helpful. And there's a lady called Jude who was the production assistant for Simon Mayo's programme. 98, the French World Cup, and they needed someone to help package up the CDs for all the producers to take out. And that's it. I started freelancing, and I freelanced on lots and lots of shows. There was a guy called Fergus Dudley. He's now head of compliance for the BBC, but he was head of mainstream. And he was like, "Oh, you'd be great with the breakfast show," and things like that. And at the time I was like, "No, I love music." But actually it was amazing because I worked on Zoe Ball's original breakfast show. People like Jamie Oliver would come. All the kind of drive stuff with Dave Pearce, all of that stuff was actually built the knowledge in me that how you can make music radio mainstream or vice versa. So it was an amazing time. And then I was working with Joe Whitey for a bit. So I was at the BBC as a freelance production assistant. I did a couple of BBC, they call their interviews boards, but I was never very good at interviews. That was always kind of a bit of a struggle. So I did that side of it. And then at the back of Music Week was an advert for Giles Peterson's show as an assistant producer. And that was an independent production company. So it meant leaving the BBC. But I applied for the job and I got it, which was an absolute dream come true. Giles, he was my favourite presenter. Musically, all the genres that I was into was in one programme. I discovered, I discovered jazz through hip hop when I was growing up. But then Giles then introduced me to the actual jazz side of the things that I was really into. The producer at the time was Benji B. So I learned under Benji for many years, editing and the kind of craft of a specialist producer. I was so nervous to leave the BBC because I was there, but my boss at the time was Lorna Clark, who's now head of music for the BBC. I went to her and I said, "I'm so nervous to leave." And she said, "You've got to leave. You'll move up quicker. You're going to do this thing. You could always come back to the BBC." And it was the best advice ever because I did. And she would use me as a bit of an example to other people years later. It's like, "Look at Karen, she's moved up, she's now producing, she's doing all of that stuff." And that was the makings, because I didn't know what an independent production company was, apart from they produced all the documentaries and the shows that I loved. I had no idea. Actually, you can still make programmes for broadcasters like the BBC, but you can do branded content, you can do events, you can then do international radio and all of that. And it opened up a whole world. With Giles, I set up the Worldwide Awards with him. We syndicated the show to airlines, did a daily show in Japan. He already had his syndicated show, so I just helped to produce that. Documentaries. Yeah, and then Benji, when One Extra was launched, he was like on the launch team. So he went over to One Extra to produce the show that he then went on to present. And yeah, that means Benji was always going to be a mega star, seeing him do all the fashion show stuff. Oh, he's such a good DJ as well.
Phenomenal. That's
where DJing started, going back to your last question, because at that time, Giles even tried to get me on the microphone. He'd be like, "Come on, you should," but I was always too shy to talk in the microphone. But he would then book me to DJ when he was playing. I would DJ with friends behind closed doors, but he was like, "Look, you've got a responsibility, You're working on a platform. You've got a responsibility for all those artists that we play on the programme, all the music you're passionate about. You have a responsibility to do more within the scene." And I was like, okay, he's right. And then that was it. From that point on, I did my own nights with Red Bull, and yeah, it continued from there.
Oh my goodness. Big shout to Giles, one of the GOITs for sure. I remember getting tapes of his Kiss FM shows mailed over from London when I was growing up in Dublin. And he's honestly, I still listen to his show. He's one of the very best in the world. Thank you for sharing that story, because, I'm kind of on the edge of my seat here. That's so exciting, and it's kind of very fast moving, and you really took advantage of these things that, you grabbed the opportunities when they arose, and you really worked incredibly hard to make all this magic happen. Was there a specific moment along this kind of fast-moving wave that you were surfing where you just thought, you know what, this is where I'm meant to be. This is it.
There's a few that pop into my head. I think when I started to produce Giles's show and doing the Worldwide Awards, when we did that first Worldwide Awards at Cargo, where radio events and everything comes together, you're like, oh my God, okay, I can make big things happen. I can put my mind to it and I can make those big things happen. Further down the line, kind of a few years into doing Folded Wing, it was definitely Jamie Cullum. I'd already started to work with him, but he called up and said, Radio 2 have asked me to do a show, and a weekly jazz show, and I really want you and Folded Wing to produce it. The other point was Red Bull Music Academy. So Giles had been working with Benji for 7 years, and I was coming up to 7 years. And at that time, I thought 7 years is such a long time. And then I got there, I went, oh God, 7 years is such a long time. I left with nothing to go to when I was working with Giles, but to continue to work with him, to help him with music, podcasts, things like that. And then I got a call 2 days later from Red Bull saying, oh, we're thinking about setting up a radio station. Will you come and chat to us? And yeah, then kind of fast forward only a handful of weeks later, I'm in Seattle helping Red Bull Music Academy set up their first radio station. And at that point, when I got there and they suddenly went, well, we don't have any content, we've got to start from scratch. And then I went, okay, I've got a DJ set from Questlove that's not been played anywhere. Call up Questlove, can I use that? And at that point, I realised that all of the skills that I'd amassed over the years were coming into a point to do something globally, I guess, that then connected everything.
You exude this passion for radio and for audio storytelling. And if you cast your mind back to 1979, I don't know if every listener would have been born by 1979, but there was this famous Bugle song that suggested that video killed the radio star. But a lot has changed since then. There was no mass internet in 1979. There were no podcasts, no TikTok. What do you think it is about the radio medium that really obviously continues to captivate in today's world of all of this fast content?
A few different reasons. It goes back to me underneath the bed sheets, you know. Nothing much has changed. There's still moments where people connect with presenters. You could call them curators, whatnot, but broadcasters. Obviously, I'm focused on music, but, you know, there's news, there's factual, there's everything. But the individual people that you can kind of connect with on an instant basis is what does it. So for me, I discovered all of the music that John Peel was playing. That still happens now, you know. Jack Saunders, there's people that listen to Radio 1 that are connected to what he would love to play. It's the same thing. It's the curation that you can't get from Spotify, from AI. And actually, the more technology comes out, I actually think that radio's light shines brighter and brighter because there is nothing that can kind of replicate. And obviously, I'm going to be biased because I work in it, but I genuinely believe, and I wouldn't be working in radio still now and care passionately about it. And obviously, there is pressures on radio. We have to do things in a bit of a different way. We have to think about different platforms. But essentially, going back to the crux of what radio is, it's that connection and it's live. It's the music or the things that you're passionate to. And obviously, podcasting can do to a certain extent, but that's important.
Speaking of fast content, really in the past 12 months, we've seen this tsunami of AI slop and video content of influencers jumping into lava and blah, blah, blah. And it's very kind of impressive, but it feels very unconnected. Do you think that there's a certain intimacy of the audio storytelling of radio that really brings a trust, a unique connection with the listeners?
Obviously, I just spoke about presenters and broadcasters, but actually, when you think about how people listen to radio as well, you know, me in the bed sheets, but actually if you're cooking in the kitchen, if you're driving somewhere, there's sort of moments where radio becomes your friend, or it's that comfort, it's that company, you know, being like both being only children growing up, it's trusted as well. There's a trust within radio. There's an editorial policy that has to come with radio, you know, no matter where you listen to it, Ofcom's there, making sure there's a big sort of trust there as well, I think.
Yeah, strong agree. And I'm somebody who does listen to radio and podcasts all the time when I'm doing something else. It's kind of the perfect medium for multitasking, and I connect with it in a way that I don't with video content, if I'm honest. So strong agree on everything you said there. But let's kind of jump back to the founding of Folded Wing. Were there any particular gaps in the industry that you were looking to fill with Folded Wing? Just
to underline, first of all, I never ever planned to set a company up. It was never in the plan. The plan was to go back to the BBC, to do some projects as a freelancer, to potentially go back to the BBC. But we'll go 2006, because that's actually the year that I started working on the company. 2006 was the time Mainly for me personally, I had loads of amazing artists come to me that I'd love to work with, or people, organisations. I want a show on Radio 1. I would like a show on 6 Music. It's like, okay, we can try and do that. It's going to be a long wait. First wave of podcasting was starting, branded content, and actually just setting up platforms as, you know, your whole platform from scratch. What an interesting time. And I never went out to get work at all. The first things I did was Red Bull Music Academy Radio. That continued for years after. Folded Wing were the high-end producer of content a few years later, but it just continued. That continued. An old colleague of mine from Radio 1 had gone to work at the Roundhouse in London, and they had empty spaces around the outside, and was like, oh, you know, do you think this empty space could be a training station? Oh, my word, yes, it could be. And that was a dream for me, going back to the story of how hard it was for me to get into it. To then be doing training was amazing. So completely set that up from scratch. So they were the two projects I did. But then, like I said, you get the individuals coming, festivals. So the first festival I worked with was the Big Chill, doing a podcast for them. And then Fabric, they came and said, oh, you know, we really want to do a podcast. So all of this stuff is happening in my house because none of it was planned. So I was doing it and doing it. My flatmate moved out. We changed his bedroom into a studio. That lounge was an office. My friend Alex was setting up Stone's Throw, the label for UK. So he rented a desk in my lounge. It was very organic and very warm. People would come and do recordings, not want to leave. Still at this point, was I not a business? I was like, we're freelancing and that's it. And then the time changed when I got a phone call from Channel 4. If you remember Channel 4, we're going to set up a radio station years and years ago. I guess it was 2008 at this point, maybe. Anyway, they called me up and said, we need someone to do the Big Brother podcast. And I said, oh, sorry, I'm too busy, but my friend here, I'll give you his number. He can help you. And I was out having a coffee with a DJ called DJ Zinc at the time, and I put the phone down. He was like, what are you doing? You say yes, and you find someone to do it. And I went, oh yeah, I didn't even think of that. And he was like, and you can use my studio if you need to do bigger stuff. And that was the time it changed completely into, this is a business. Yeah. Again, we never pitched for anything. We never did anything with the BBC for the first 3-4 years of the company. It was all branded content. I think we were one of the first, if not the first, production company to be set up on branded content, basically. I did a podcast series with Nike, worked with Coke, and internationally as well, not just in this country.
I love it. I love that story of organic growth, and I love that conversation with DJ Zinc there. But, you know, you've really built Folded Wing as a company that is synonymous with creativity and diversity in radio and podcasting. So talk to us a bit about the importance of that identity and how you made this company, this organisation, with that integrity really baked into its DNA.
Thank you for recognising that. That's very, very, very important to me. And I think it came from going back to the Zinc conversation. Like, Giles just called me Karen P. That stuck. That was my DJ name. Then we were just Karen P Productions, just because it evolved into it. But then as I was starting to get more and more freelancers working with me, I was like, well, it's a lot bigger than just me. So I need to think of a name. And thinking of names as a radio producer is one of the hardest things to do sometimes. I went back to a book Jonathan Livingston Seagull was given to me when I was 13 at secondary school. A teacher gave it to me. I was being picked on by a group of girls, and he gave the book to me. At certain points in my life, I know reading that book will either help or it will lead me to something. So I read the book again and I was like, I know it will come from reading it. And sure enough, it came so strong. And I realised the whole book is based around what I was trying to do in the organisation. And for anyone that doesn't know the Jonathan Livingston Seagull book, it's about a seagull. He wants to fly further and faster. He wants to do things differently. And the flock are like, no, you should be happy with who you are. So he decides, he runs away and he tries all different ways of flying. And he works out if he folds his wings like a falcon, he can go further and faster. But then he comes back to the flock to show them, you know, how he has done everything. So I was like, Folded Wing, that's the name. The logo is a bird, and that bird is shaped from a leaf from my first mixtape. It was all very organic. And from day one of the company, we've had, you know, work placements are important, but work placements going very quickly into freelance work, places for people that wouldn't normally get access to being on the radio, training elements to everything we do. So obviously I said that we set up Roundhouse Radio from scratch. For me, what I'm passionate about, I think mostly is especially with young people, they go, I want to be a radio presenter, or I want my own podcast. But actually showing people all the different elements of audio. There's editing. If you're into making music, you can make some jingles or some sound design. You know, there is all of the skills that go into producing, assistant producer, production assistant. So it's trying to demystify all the kind of roles within radio is important. And as Folded Wings grown, every single element of any of our weekly programmes has had some form of training. The British Council show, The Selector, that we did for 13 years, millions of people all around the world syndicated, promoting British music, we did that a partnership with the Student Radio Association and student stations around the world. That's where Cassidy Bailey came from, and Jack Saunders, that was his first training that he ever did. I actually bumped into Jack a couple of years ago at Glastonbury, and he was like, without that training at that point, I wouldn't be where I am. And I was like, there's just certain moments where you're like, that's why we do it all. It comes from, I guess, my roots growing up through to the frustration. I feel like, although I did work so hard, and like when I was working on Giles' show, I'd work till 3 a.m. most days because I was passionate, I wanted to do it. But I still feel like I was lucky to have got to where I got to. And some people might not be as lucky as me to have answered those letters, to have done that. And that makes me sad. It makes me sad that certain people from working class backgrounds or different backgrounds can't have those opportunities because they can't afford to work for free for a period of time. And I try and do my little bit. There's still so much that needs to be done, and I guess we're responsible for doing that. We will continue to do that, and there has been some change, but there's still room for more.
Indeed. Well played, Karen. I love the backstory of Folded Wing there as well. Let's move into some of the folks that you've worked with, because you've mentioned a few names already. Are there any interesting or memorable behind the scenes moments that capture the essence of what you do working with these absolutely legendary people?
There's lots of things that pop into my mind. I guess an early memory, which is it's one of my favourite memories. This is way before I set up Folded Wing, but I just think it's the magic of radio. I went out with Giles we did a documentary called We Live in Philly, Baby, which was about the kind of all the artists like Jill Scott and The Roots and all this amazing stuff. I mean, it was the best week of my life. Questlove looked after me, and for the few days where Giles wasn't there, and then Giles came out, and had the most amazing time. And one of the memories that stays with me is we had an interview with Jill Scott. She was in my hotel room. I was like, Jill Scott is amazing. And just a moment that sticks is that she got Giles to sing with her. It's the entertaining moments of radio within music that stay with you. Jamie Cullum, we've been producing his show on Radio 2 for the last 15 years. And it's an absolute dream come true to work on that show. That's definitely the thing that I'm most proudest of, I think. There's a moment where Jamie got asked to do a track for a Clint Eastwood film called Gran Torino. So he was out there working with Clint Eastwood, and I was like, if you're working with Clint Eastwood, can we just not do an interview with him for the show? And he was like, I'll ask him and see if that is possible. And it was possible, and I went out to LA to go to Clint Eastwood's studio with Jamie, and it was mind-blowing because we're in Clint Eastwood's studio, number one. There's a piano all set up. So all the songs that they were talking about, there's Clint Eastwood at a piano, being able to illustrate it. It's all being filmed by Clint Eastwood's sort of film crew. The people that he works with on his feature films are there filming it. And I just said, do you think I could use there you go. This is amazing. Although it was slightly embarrassing because I got there, we were using Jamie's laptop and the zip broke on his laptop case. And we were like trying to be cool in front of everyone. Yeah, we got this under control. It's fine. But it was just those kind of moments where you sweat, where you're like, is the equipment going to work? That was amazing. But what was also amazing was other interviews with Jamie where people like Clint Eastwood or Dave Brubeck is another memory, where interviews within radio where people open up in a way that they never have done before, or they feel like they're telling their whole story. So Dave Brubeck interview with Jamie he just wanted to tell Jamie his life story. Dave passed away not soon after, but quite after that, and we ended up making a 2-hour special. It's just Jamie's connection with artists or people is so magical in a way, or having two musicians talk to each other in a way that wouldn't normally be opened is amazing. A recent one, we got to another dream came true. The BBC wanted to do the very first daily jazz show on Radio 3. Oh, what a dream. The premise is mainly UK music and having a platform for everything happening in UK jazz, which is actually in the best position it's ever been. We put forward Soweto Kinch to do that show, so we've been working with him. And another moment was live at the Barbican doing a free gig last November in the foyer of the Barbican for London Jazz Festival, and just watching Soweto interview the artists on stage and just being like, this is magic. For me, it's like events have been a way of promoting radio or podcasts, and just watching him. He did radio before, but just seeing him as a broadcast flourish in this space is amazing. So it's just, when you're working with a presenter for a long time, you see them in a different context and they smash it is always a magical moment.
Oh, beautiful. Pure magic there. My goodness. I'm looking forward to the Netflix of your career so far. These moments are like brilliant. These are the highlights of the episodes. Jill Scott, Giles Peterson in that hotel room, just tick, tick, tick. That's amazing. You know, you help people really find their voice and build trust and build up these audiences, but it's also very personal, very distinct, very expressive shows, very creative. It's not kind of by the numbers. Everything is very authentic. How do you actually help talent to kind of make that magic happen?
I absolutely love when you're working with someone, they're just on the start of their journey, or they've been doing it for a hell of a long time, but they're a new audience or a new way of presenting. And it's really, I mean, I give them homework. I give them homework. I get them to listen to various shows, like Pick of the Pops. I will get Tony Blackburn. I will say, listen to how amazing he is as a broadcaster. I'll give homework. The case of Jamie, we did hours and hours in the studio before we did our very first show. Hours and hours in the studio again before we did a live show. If a presenter is up for putting the work in, that's fine. I mean, we had back in Clerkenwell, we had quite a small voice booth, and Jamie laughs that you were like, you made me sweat in that voice booth, and we'd do it for hours. But every presenter is different, and every presenter needs production in a different way. Sometimes it can take a week to work that out. Sometimes it can take a year or 2 years. And it's as simple as even just the scripting. Some people need it written out word for word, and some people need bullet points. All I'm trying to do, or all we're trying to do, is an amazing team of people. It isn't just me, is that we're trying to just make each person be the best version of their natural selves on the radio, really. It's just as simple as that. And finding their broadcast voice. And I'm so proud of, like I said, you hear Jamie interview someone. He's become an amazing broadcaster with many years ahead of him, you know, and that comes from other things. Ramesh Ranganathan's hip hop show, like, you know, he puts in so much love and energy, like no matter how busy he is, no matter he's on tour, he's doing all this stuff, somebody important in the world of hip hop's passed away. He's come in physically into that studio to record those links. And it's also, for me, having the flexibility of the production team. We'll get a phone call at 2:00 in the morning going, oh my God, this massive jazz release is out. I cannot believe we've not put that in the show. The team have to be as flexible. And also every presenter we're working with is so busy is that you need that flexibility. So I have to say that the Folded Wing team go above and beyond every single week to make sure that the presenters are comfortable. And it's definitely a two-way relationship. And there's a trust in the production team on music, the people that have picked. That's where the connection between a producer and a presenter is so important. And once the presenter feels comfortable in the team, they can relax and do what they need to do.
Yeah, well said. Like, as you're describing it, I get that sense of excitement and the sense of everyone working together towards this one moment where the voice comes over the radio, it reaches people at home, they connect, they have that trust and this kind of ongoing connection with the curator, the presenter and the entire team behind the scenes. So you are kind of distilling down these months of practice, Jamie there sweating in the vocal booth, and it all comes down to this moment where it makes that deep emotional connection with the listeners. There's a lot of work that goes into the magic, but it is absolutely magic. So thank you for taking us behind the scenes there. But let's talk about podcasts, because obviously Folded Wing was one of the pioneers with podcasts. You mentioned a lot of branded podcasts coming to yourselves first and really helping a lot of people find their way in this world. And podcasts have really exploded in the past decade. Some folks refer to the certain global elections as being podcast elections these days. That's the level of the influence. How do you see the impact of podcasts these days compared to traditional quote unquote radio?
I love podcasts for the fact of they have made audio even more accessible to more audiences. And for me, that's mega. That change in COVID, suddenly we come out of COVID and people that like self-help things, they've found podcasts as that side. And I think obviously we were doing podcasts in 2006, but the technology hadn't quite caught up. The technology is here for podcasts to flourish, and it's given so many more people platforms and voices. That's what I love, and a freedom to, back in the day, the reason that Folded Wing was set up was, you know, that frustration that you can't just wait to have a show on the BBC. And now it's like times 50, you know, people have platforms for doing various, whatever they want.
It's really a massively democratizing force. But do you think there's something that podcasts can do and radio can't do, and vice versa?
Oh, God, yes. I could talk about this for ages. Yeah. So I think that, like I said, podcasts can really give people a platform in a way. You know, they don't have to wait for things to be commissioned by a broadcaster. You can just go out and do it. It doesn't matter what length it is. You can make a name for yourself. And then the flip side of that is, obviously, I make music radio programs. So at first, I used to love the fact that you can't put music on that you don't own the rights to. At first, I thought that's great because you need to use your imagination for how you use music on podcasts. But now I get frustrated. I just love the fact that on radio, you can play whatever music you want to play. You could argue that both medium is instant. You know, it's very quick to get something commissioned to pop up as a podcast, but radio is live. You know, a lot of radio is live. That can be instant. It can change with the mood of the presenter. It can change with who's being interviewed. And it's warts and all, the kind of radio mistakes that you get, whereas podcasting can be edited out. Going back to the values and the trust of radio, the Ofcom side of stuff, like you trust that, whereas podcasts isn't, you know. So there's positives and minuses in both. I mean, actually, the reason people love to listen to podcasts is the freedom of people's opinions and everything else.
Yeah, indeed. As somebody once said, there's enough soup in the pot there for the lover of inspiring audio, whether it's on radio or podcasts. But let's come back a bit to the Folded Wing ethos, because I was very impressed by what you said earlier about how you've built the company and the principles and the guiding lights. You do create inclusive spaces and you do uplift underrepresented voices via your work at Folded Wing. Are there any core principles that you can share that can help our listeners understand how you actually guide this work today?
It goes back to when I said when the company was in my house. That, for me, is the ethos of the company. It is like when we build studios or we build offices or we're working together, there's a warmth and an openness so people feel comfortable to talk about how they're feeling. We try and give opportunities to people even before they're ready, but with support. So there's myself, but there's Ian Parkinson, who was my boss at Radio 1. He was head of specialists. So he's been working with me from day one. He's one of our exec producers. And then there's an amazing exec called Rafe Powell. So he used to work at One Extra. So the three of us are very experienced. So the team can work with us in maybe a bit more of an open way, and there's three people with different experience to learn from. I think that's really, really important. A safe space for people to have ideas, to be able to put things forward. We're lucky enough to work with really nice clients and nice presenters. So it's really important to me that all parts of the company match the ethos of what we care about, because otherwise it's not going to work. I learned that a few years ago. I mean, there have been times in the company's time that I've had to even let clients go. That's a hard decision to make when you've got a business, but we can keep agile enough to do that. That is more important to me than running a multi-million-pound organisation. Flexibility, like I said, is important. You know, people, staff and presenters have lives going on. There's all sorts of things that can change. So being flexible to that is really, really, really important. And being human, like talking to people, finding out what's going on. I think it's such an exciting time. It's back to how exciting it was in 2006 in a way that it's growing. And what's personally important to me is that the diversity of, as an organisation, we're constantly looking further afield for talent on and off the radio. And I think as an industry, we have to continue to do that. It's definitely changing. It is definitely doing that. There's more work that could be done.
Yeah, stay human, stay real, and you get the best talent. If I can invite you now to take out your crystal ball, the Karen P crystal ball, let's have a look at your hopes for the future of the radio and this kind of audio storytelling sector. Where do you think it's going, and are there any changes that you would like to see to reach the future you would like it to be in?
Like I mentioned before, audio is in such a good place. And obviously it was so good to see the creative industry sector plan that the government launched a couple of weeks ago. I was like, great, that's so good. And it was so good from a training perspective for young people. But I was really quite shocked to see that radio and podcasting was not part of their vision. And I felt like it needs to be part of the vision when at a point where globally the UK is absolutely smashing it, especially in the podcast market. It needs to formally recognise that podcasting and audio is part of the creative industries. And I was shocked it's not, because I've spent years, I was on the board of Audio UK, which is the charity that oversees independent radio in the UK. And I was on the board there for many years. I shout out that organisation. It's an amazing organisation. And I sat on a couple of select committees during COVID about how audio and radio should be part of it. I was shocked that it hadn't moved on anymore. I think that podcast and audio producers need to be part of the policy making. There needs to be targeted support, tax relief, IP fund. We need to fuel the growth and investment for it. You know, it's done in television. I feel that podcasting and audio is at a point where we're on a par. So it needs to be recognised as much as everything. And I think that the plans for podcasting and audio need to be part of everything, because the skills, the exports and the regional development, I mean, that's what I'm passionate about, and I'm sure it will be part of it. It's just going to take its time, but I just get frustrated it's not happening now.
Amen. Absolutely. I mean, the size, the scale of the creative industries for the UK is, and has always been, mind-blowing. It's been a cultural leader. I think the creative industries make in 2 or 3 days what the entire UK fishing industry at its peak made in an entire year. And sometimes political attention and media attention can go towards men with boats. And
yes.
that's because it's a bit of a vote winner. And they're not really talking about this financial and cultural powerhouse that is the creative industries in the UK, and radio and podcasting is obviously a huge part of that. So I love your passion, and I really look forward to what's going to be coming next down the UK pipeline there. But let's talk about Folded Wing. Is there anything that you can share with us in terms of upcoming projects or passions that you have in the pipeline for the future?
20 years of Folded Wing next year, so I'm really thinking about that. It's 15 years of Jamie Cullum's show, and I've really been doing a lot of thinking, and I got a big realisation only a few months ago, well maybe last year, that we're actually the biggest producer of jazz content in the UK, maybe in Europe. That's massive, and what's happened is that I've had my head too far into everything that I haven't sort of come up to realise that. So making more of that, really. We have the best Folded Wing team we've ever had, and especially within jazz, like everyone's working together so well. There's such a passion, there's such an energy, such an ambition to do sort of bigger pieces of work. So I think what you'll see from Folded Wing is us going back to our roots a little bit more in setting up platforms and doing more events. So we naturally set up events as a way of promoting the radio shows that we do. You'll see more of that. We're doing a prom for Soweto Kinch's Round Midnight programme at the end of the month at the Firehouse in Sunderland. Theon Cross, Joe Webb, Rafika, that is going to be mega. You're going to see Soweto blossom within that. Hopefully we're going to do another London Jazz Festival. More platforms for the programmes that we make. Yeah, doing things on a little bit more of a bigger scale. That's what we're planning.
I love to hear it. That's brilliant. Well, watch this space. And of course, we're going to be linking to Folded Wing and your good self in the show notes there for all of our listeners to check out and mark their diaries for the prom of the year. But listen, we're going to wrap things up now. But before we go, I would love if you could share one piece of advice to someone who might be starting out in radio or podcasting. What's one thing that you could say to them?
The main bit of advice that I always give is do not be scared to reach out to people. Now, if you're really passionate about a certain subject, there's a radio show or podcast you absolutely love and you listen to it religiously, reach out to the team. Just reach out to them and say, I'd love to come and watch, I'd love to come and meet you. But reach out with ideas. Like, I listened to the programme and I got some social media ideas, or I've got an idea of a really exciting guest. Like, nobody can ignore passion. Like, if you're going to reach out to someone, and I think that you've got to go for it and you've got to reach out to that. And obviously we get a lot of emails a lot of the time, but if someone comes to us with ideas or passion, we will meet them, help them, give them advice. We might not have any roles at the time, but we can certainly point them in the right direction. So that's always my advice, is don't be scared to put yourself out there.
Nobody can ignore passion. That is a quote that you could easily print out and have on the wall as a motivation. That's just absolutely brilliant. So let's wrap things up with a quick fire round. Talk to us about radio shows or podcasts that you listen to the most today. What would they be?
I mean, my favourite broadcaster is Jam Supernova. I mean, she's absolutely amazing. I mean, everything that she stands for, not just as a broadcaster, but as a presenter, as a platform, as a label owner, everything. She started off as a radio producer. Amazing. Jo Wiley on Radio 2. I mean, the smile that you can hear when she presents is amazing. I think one of the best broadcasters that we've got in this country for history, but also what she does now. I still obviously listen to Giles all the time. Podcast-wise, the ones that I must probably listen to the most is James Liddell's Hanging Out with Audiophiles that we helped him launch. I think it's great to see how he's grown that. The deep dive into a very niche subject is nice to have on in the background. But with podcasts and radio, I can't relax to them because I'll be starting to go, oh, that edit, or maybe you could do. I'm like, no. So yeah, it's a shame. They're not my relaxing tools. I still listen to music to relax, but not so much radio or podcasts.
Okay, in the quickfire round, we are continuing. Who is your dream collaborator?
Oh, there's lots of them, but I think Femi Colioso, the drummer for Ezra Collective. We've done lots of stuff with him in the past. So when we did some training for Tomorrow's Warriors, he came, did some things. He's decked for us on various shows, but doing something massive with him. Obviously, Ezra Collective are globally massive and they're doing some massive things, but doing something on a massive scale, that would be the dream. For me, he is the John Peel of today as a storyteller. Like, I remember seeing him present a tribute to Tony Allen at the South Bank, and he just blew me away with his connection to the audience, and obviously an Ezra Collective show all about joy and everything that he stands for. Yeah, doing something on a mega scale would definitely be a dream.
Oh, fantastic. I really hope that happens. Okay, and the last question from me now is to choose not one, but 2 tracks for our VIP title playlist, because it is the last edition of the series. So let's just push the boat out and we'll have 2 tracks each. What would they be?
Sticking with Femi and Ezra Collective, I'd go God Gave Me Feet for Dancing, which it's such a tune, and my daughter loves it too. And then on one of my favourite UK jazz albums of all time, Quiet Sane, and there's a track on there called Short Stories, which, oh my God, I mean, it's Anthony Tidd, and he pulled together Esker and the most ridiculous lineup of UK jazz musicians, and it does not age as an album. I think it's most probably 20, 25 plus years, but when you listen to it, it just says everything that we have to give when it comes to UK jazz.
Fantastic. Absolutely beautiful choices there. Thank you. My own contributions to the playlist for this edition, I'm going to choose 2. The first up is Soylent Pimp Sessions with AIE. It's a big jazz band banger. I love it. It's unstoppable. And the second one, Lalo Schifrin, Agnus Dei, because it's a high quality, sophisticated earworm, and he passed away recently. So listen, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Karen Pearson. It has been an absolute joy to catch up with you.
Oh, thank you. I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you. Good choices for tracks as well.
Thank you very much. Okay, folks, that was Karen Pearson, one of radio's quiet revolutionaries and a true force in the world of sound. To learn more about Folded Wing, Karen's work, or anything mentioned today, check out the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow, rate and share the episode. It really does help us bring more inspiring voices to your ears. For more exclusive content, some behind the scenes goodies, and maybe even some competitions, connect with us over on the Instagram. You can find us at Audio Talks Podcast. We'll be back soon for some more radio-friendly Audio Talks. See you next time.